Chapter 1. My name is George, and I'm an illegitimate child. Since I was little, my mom has always told me you have to be better than everyone else. Only then will the Wong family acknowledge you. So I studied like my life depended on it, always taking first place in exams, just so one day I could walk into the Wang family's house with my head held high. But today I found out I'm nothing more than a villain, a side character in a novel. I was standing on stage as the freshman representative. Below was a sea of people, countless eyes staring at me like knives, ready to slice apart the perfect image I had worked so hard to maintain. I read those lofty, noble lines with confidence: study hard, serve society, pursue excellence. Suddenly a sharp pain exploded in my temple, as if someone had split my skull open with an axe. Fragments of images flashed before my eyes. Willow, the transfer student who always kept her head down when walking through the hallway. Her eyes were damp like a kitten caught in the rain. Makoto, a boy who was both a stranger and oddly familiar. His earring gleamed coldly under the sunlight as he pinched Willow's chin and smirked at me. She's mine, and then myself, kneeling in a pool of blood, a knife in my chest, while Willow's hands trembled as she held a gun. Bang, the gunshot roared through my mind. I snapped back to reality, realizing I had already finished reading my speech. The audience erupted into applause, but my back was drenched in sweat, my shirt clinging to my skin like a layer of cold snake skin. I had seen my future, no more precisely the future in the book. Back in my dorm, I downed half a bottle of ice water, trying to extinguish the fire in my head. The face in the mirror was deathly pale, lips trembling like a pathetic madman. My life was a script someone else had written. I would fall in love with Willow, lose my mind over her and Makoto, and end up dying miserably. My fingers absent-mindedly scratched at the corner of the desk until a wooden splinter wedged between them. The pain jolted me into a bit of clarity. Calm down, George, you've never believed in fate, and you're not about to start now. Once I was calmer, I began planning my countermeasures. Avoid Willow. Tomorrow I'd apply for a class change and stay away from any place I might run into her, make money. My mom's allowance was barely enough to survive. I had to save enough to get out of here time. In the original novel, Makoto didn't transfer until our senior year of high school. That gave me 2 years to prepare. The pen carved deep lines into the paper like a knife etching into wood. As long as I stayed away from the plot, I could live. From that day on, I started my crazy money making mode. I got up at 6 in the morning to tutor 2 spoiled rich kids online in English. They couldn't even tell the difference between a subject and a predicate, but that was fine long as the money came in. I could teach a pig to climb a tree during the 10th minute express break between classes. I didn't waste a second. Took on 3 orders for competition essay ghostwriting school. I headed straight to an internet cafe, logged into the dark web, picked up academic paper gigs. I typed until the early hours of the morning. My ISO dried, felt like sand had been poured into them, but the numbers in my bank account kept climbing bit by bit. My mom had been in an unusually good mood lately because I had finally wised up and decided to work hard. She had no idea that hidden in the drawer of my desk was an application form for a university in Switzerland. 5,000 yuan. Once I saved that much, I'd be free. But no matter how hard I tried to avoid her, I kept running into Willow, getting bullied. In the cafeteria, a group of girls surrounded her, spilling a bowl of hot soup over her uniform. She kept her head down, shoulders hunched like a rain-soaked sparrow. I should have just turned and walked away, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. Teacher's coming. I suddenly shouted. The girls scattered in panic. Willow lifted her head for a brief moment, but I had already slipped into the crowd and disappeared. I couldn't have any interaction with her, not even once. But fate, like a sadistic director, kept pushing her into my path. In the library, she was locked in a storage room, her knocking faint like a cat's meow. I kicked over the hallway fire hydrant, and the blaring alarm brought the staff rushing in, sneaking out at midnight to the internet cafe. I heard muffled sobbing in an alley. Willow was cornered by a few thugs, her backpack strapped, broken book scattered across the ground. This plot correction force was ridiculous. Finally, one afternoon in the self-studies room, Willow cornered me. George, I looked up. She stood there awkwardly at my desk, fingers tightly clutching the hem of her shirt. A sinking feeling hit my chest. What is it? My tone was calm, but my fingers were tapping the desk unconsciously. That was my thinking habit. Willow took a deep breath, pulled an envelope from her pocket, and pushed it toward me. I want to hire you to tutor me. My eyes fell on the envelope through the semi-stiff-the-park paper. I could see a thin stack of bills inside, clearly money she had been saving for a long time now because of my side hustle. I had somehow drawn the female lead straight to me. Don't take it. I warned myself silently in the book's storyline. Willow and I would inevitably get entangled, leading to mutual destruction. I had only just woken up to the truth and was planning to save enough money to run far away. This was no time to invite trouble. Sorry, I don't take on long-term tutoring. I closed my book, my tone detached. If you need last-minute exam prep materials, I can provide them, charge per subject. Willow didn't back down. I know you've helped a lot of people. Her voice was quiet but firm. Their grades improved because of you. My fingers paused mid-tour. Willow lifted her head, her gaze carrying a kind of desperate determination as she said, I'm not like them. I had no way out. I had no words. Of course, I knew she had no way out in the book. After failing her college entrance exam, Willow Liu was completely abandoned by the Liu family, forced to work in a bar, and eventually picked up by the young heir of a crime syndicate, thus beginning a tragic romance. And I, as the future villainous boss, would eventually barge into their story, using every method possible to take her away, which would end in total ruin for all three of us. But what if I helped her now? The thought came suddenly. If I couldn't avoid it, maybe I should do the opposite. If Willow never ended up working in a bar, she'd never meet the mafia heir, Makoto, and naturally she wouldn't get caught in that twisted romance plot. Then maybe I could completely escape the fate of being the villain boss. I took a deep breath, adjusted my glasses, and stepped toward Willow. Let's gamble. After all, once I graduate high school, I'm disappearing for good. I stared at Willow for a few seconds, then suddenly smiled. You know my rates. Willow pressed her lips together. I can pay you this amount first, and then make regular payments for the rest. I shook my head and pushed the envelope back to her. I don't want money. She froze. I want you to promise me one thing. My voice was quiet, but every word weighed like a calculated trade-off. No matter what happens after we graduate, we'll never contact each other again. Phase 1 wrote memorization. I slapped a thick stack of printed papers onto the desk. Willow looked down. It was densely packed with formulas, theorems, dates, and definitions, math symbols labeled with phonetic notes. English vocabulary grouped by roots, historical events turned into mnemonic rhymes. Can't understand it. I asked, pushing my glasses up. The cold library light reflected off the lenses. That's normal. You don't need to understand it yet. Just nail it into your head like a spike. I opened a brand new era notebook. The inside cover printed with a golden memory curve chart. Memorize new material at 5 a.m., review the morning's work at lunch, recap everything before bed. My finger tapped the chart. 1 mistake, copy it 10 times. 2 mistakes, 20 times, and so on. Willow's throat tightened. How long I have to memorize like this until you can write it out with your left hand from memory? I pulled out a fountain pen and handed it to her. From now on, your hands only do 3 things, right? Memorize and eat. By the first week, Willow's wrists were swollen like the buns. By the second, she was dreaming of dancing math symbols. By the third month, she could handle my sudden pop quizzes, spitting out textbook content at an impressive speed. Phase 2, understanding and application. I slid over a thick pile of handwritten notes. You've got bricks in your head. Now time to learn how to build a wall. The first time she solved a derivative problem on her own, eyes lit up like stars. Mr. Wong, I did it the moment our eyes met. It hit me like lightning in the original novel. The first time George fell for the heroine was when he saw her stubborn determination. While studying, that night, I conned my head by grinding through 3 full SAT practice tests. Why do you take on so much work? One late night, Willow finally asked as she watched me answering 5 ghostwriting emails at once. The monitor's blue glow reflected my stiff smile. Saving money for studying abroad, for staying alive. I regretted the words as soon as they left my mouth, but she only nodded, then suddenly grabbed my keyboard. From now on, I'll do the typing jobs for you, no payment. I watched her awkwardly peck at the keys, her eyelashes casting small shadows across her face. 3 months before the college entrance exam, Willow broke into the top 50 in the great rankings in the original story. This was when she had given up completely and was working at a convenience store, getting harassed by a drunk. But now she clutched her report card and beamed at me. Mr. Wong, I can get into. A sunlight poured through the library's glass window, coating her in gold. My hand instinctively moved toward my chest, where there should have been that heart-twent pain the original George always felt when he saw the heroine smile. But all I felt was a warm sting, like frozen hands touching hot water. Not even close. I tossed her another set of practice tests. You're not sleeping until you finish these tonight, George. What are you thinking? Forget it. Just treat it like taking care of a stray cat. Once she's done with the college entrance exam, I'll walk away without looking back. Chapter 2, Liu family doesn't keep freeloaders. My name is Willow Liu, and this was the first thing my father said to me on the first day I was brought back to the Liu household. He sat on a leather sofa, the cold light reflecting off his gold-rimmed. My mother stood behind him, her manicured fingers painted crimson, resting lightly on his shoulder. Father adjusted his glasses, his eyes behind the lenses, assessing me like merchandise. Although Carolina is not our biological daughter, she scored 1550 on the SAT, has a level 10 piano certificate, and reached B2 level in French. Mother handed me a cup of tea. The bottom of the cup tapped against the glass coffee table with a crisp sound. This family plays no favorites. Resources will be given to the more out, whether they're related by blood or not. I gripped the strap of my faded canvas bag, my nails digging into the calluses of my palm. What a joke to make a girl who grew up in the slums compete in overall quality against a fake Harris who had enjoyed 16 years of elite education. I'll work hard, I heard myself say. Liu. Mother handed me another sheet of paper. This is your admission letter to an elite private high school. Before you turn 18, we'll give you the best education. She paused. No matter how you wasted your life before, we're giving you a chance now. Liu father looked out toward the garden. Your mother is right. Hardship is not an excuse. When Carolina heard you were coming back, she fell into depression too, but she worked her way out of it. Carolina's eyes read and right on cue. Dad, please don't at once. Father's expression softened, of course. My little princess mother patted my shoulder, her red nails digging into the washed-out fabric of my school uniform. If you can't get into a university, we won't consider investing in you further. Once you're an adult, you'll leave the Liu family and fend for yourself. Failures don't deserve to stay in the Liu household. The bullying at the elite school was so childish it was almost laughable. My desk was always covered in graffiti. My textbooks often accidentally end up in the toilet, but I had no time to care in the storage room that served as my bedroom. I studied my midterm paper by the dim light of a desk lamp. The red score 38 on the cover was like a slap to the face. To hell with overall quality. I spat out the taste of blood. My lips still stung from biting them earlier in this family. Grades were the only currency. Liu father had made it clear either stand out or get out. Talents I'd never even touched, a piano key, social skills. Those debutant looked at me like I was a rat crawling out of a sewer. All I had left was the path of studying. I had to go all in. I refused to be thrown away like garbage, and the person most likely to help me at this school was the famously gentle top student. George. Rumor had it that he patiently answered questions for anyone willing to pay. Providing service with a smile, I pulled out the pocket money I'd saved over 3 months. A thin stack of bills damp with sweat. That afternoon in the old library, when I pushed open the door, a boy was standing with his back to me, arranging books on a shelf, white shirt, black trousers, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing lean forearms. George, I asked tentatively the first time my grades made it into the top 50 in the year. George bought me Odin from the stall outside the school gate's reward. He pushed the steaming paper cup toward me, and in the curling mist I saw his eyes curve slightly behind the lenses. Keep it up. I bit into a fishball, stealing glances at his profile as he bent over his notebook. Calculating. Lately he'd been taking on more and more work, ghostwriting papers, building competition resumes for spoiled rich kids, even organizing academic materials for teachers. His notebook was always filled with meticulous in command expense tables. Every ent, every accurate to the last decimal place. George, I finally couldn't hold it in. How much do you still need for your study abroad fund? His pen paused for a fraction of a second, but he didn't look up a lot. Scholarship, not enough. Nowhere near enough. He closed the ledger, then suddenly reached over and plucked a piece of seaweed stuck to the corner of my mouth. You've got food on your face. His fingertips were warm, brushing away like a dragonfly skimming the surface of water. My face burned instantly, and I ducked my head to gulp down more soup. The other day I'd fallen asleep at my desk and woke up with his jacket draped over me, carrying the faint scent of cedar. Yesterday, while explaining a problem, his arm brushed my shoulder, only for him to jerk away as if shocked every time I thought there was something different between us. He would draw the line, either by suddenly assigning double the homework or spending the entire day talking only about money, never about lessons. Maybe it was just me overthinking someone like him, clear, bright, untouchable, would never fall for a scarred, wild girl like me. The library in May was stifling. I was wrestling with a calculus problem when my vision suddenly darkened. George pressed a cold can of Coke to my forehead. 10-minute break, he said, sitting across from me. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. You're improving quickly. Droplets slid down the can, forming a small circle on the desk. I stared at the movement of his throat, then noticed a red string peeking from beneath his collarbone was reaching out. Without thinking, George jerked backward, the chair screeching across the floor. Hades turned in the self-study room as his face went cold as ice. "Don't touch it." My hand froze midair a talisman, he finally said stiffly. "Family superstition." It wasn't until later that I learned it was the Wong family's bloodline token. Every illegitimate child wore one, and only when acknowledged by the family could they take it off. A week before the college entrance exam, Carolina cornered me at the stairwell. "You think that broke? Boy can help you turn your life around." Her freshly done crystal nails scraped across my collar. "Just wait, you'll never what?" I slapped her hand away. "If you're gonna say it, finish it," she smiled, suddenly leaning close to whisper in my ear. "Never be worthy." The next day after school, 3 thugs blocked my way on the street. There was no hero to save me this time. Comminuted fracture of the right hand, the doctor said with a shake of his head. "You'll need at least 3 months of rest outside the consultation room." Lou's father was on the phone. "Send Carolina to the UK immediately." "Yes, say it's for early adjustment to overseas life." I stared at the plaster cast until George burst through the door. The cuffs of his white shirt were stained with ink, his breathing uneven like he'd been running. His knuckles were white from how tightly he clenched his fists, but his voice was calm, as if we were discussing the weather. "Can it be temporarily stabilized? She has an important exam in 3 days. The doctor gave us a look reserved for lunatics and ushered us out 10 minutes later at a cafe. I stared down at the practice sheet, the crude one character I traced wobbling across the page. My tears finally splashed onto the paper. "I can't do it." George snatched up a pen and, using his left hand, swiftly wrote several lines, neat and forceful, hardly betraying it wasn't his dominant hand. "See that? That's what I managed after a month of practice." He raised a brow back. "Then I had so much work that my right hand gave out. I had to force myself to start over with my left." I stared at the writing, my throat tight. 3 days. Can I get like that in your dreams?" George let out a short laugh. "If you can stop your left hand from shaking in 3 days, that'll be a miracle." He took my left ray, his grip firm but not painful. "The point isn't making it pretty. It's making it possible. Your hand needs to be steady and strong enough to last through the test, or you'll be done halfway." He gently lifted my left hand, his fingertips measuring the pressure at my wrist bone. "It's like running a marathon. You need the most energy-efficient grip." As he spoke, he adjusted the position of my fingers. "This way you will last longer." He pulled out a blank answer sheet, gripped a pen in his left hand, and began shading in bubbles with rapid, fluid strokes. "You're used to writing answers on the test paper first, then copying them onto the answer sheet. Skip that step." Now he tapped his temple. "Keep it in your head, fill in the answer sheet directly, less pen movement." "What about the big questions?" I asked. "Be concise," George said firmly. "For math and physics, write only the key formulas and the final results. For language and politics, hit the scoring points. Write a single unnecessary word." He pulled out a practice test. "Your answering strategy needs to change." Flipping to another page, he revealed a flowcharts in different colors, multiple choice, fill it indirect on the answer sheet, no rough work, big questions. Keep answers as short as a telegram, pointing at his compiled scoring points collection, he explained. Take this physics problem. If you write the key formula and the final answer, you'll get 80% of the points. But what about the essay? That's the toughest one. George narrowed his eyes. "A few hundred words. Your left hand won't make it." So he pulled out a piece of paper and swiftly wrote a short poem. "Write poetry where classical Chinese prose I gawk, that's allowed, worth a gamble?" George shrugged. "Some teachers don't like it, but if it's on topic, you won't score." Low poems and classical prose are short, just a few dozen characters instead of forcing out 800. Here he tossed me a booklet titled High Score Board Exam Poems and Prose Examples. Memorize the rhymes and common references in the next 2 days. Make something up on the spot in the exam. I took a deep breath, gripped the pen with my left hand, and the moment the tip touched paper, it skidded sideways. "Don't stop." George's voice was cold. "If your left hand gets tired, switch to your head, mentally rehearse the answering process. Once your hands rested, pick up the pen again." His gaze was fixed on me. "Remember, the goal isn't pretty handwriting, it's finishing the paper. You can't lose many points for messy writing, but if you miss scoring points, you're done." He pressed a thick barrel pen into my hand, thicker grip, less effort. The night wind ruffled the fringe over his forehead. Without thinking, I asked, "You knew this would happen?" George's pen paused. "What you knew I'd eventually." I lifted my plaster cast right hand, lose the use of my right hand. His pupils shrank sharply for a moment. I was almost certain he was hiding something huge, but in the next second he was back to his unruffled self. 3 days is enough to make your left hand write something legible. On the first day, my left hand shook like I had Parkinson's. George cut the answer sheet into strips. Practice shading bubbles, keep your wrists, use your finger joints for force. On the second day I could scroll crooked formulas on scratch paper. He handed me a stack of past high schooling exam essays featuring poems and classical prose. Memorize 20 pieces. Mimic their style for your essay. By the third day at dawn I'd fallen asleep at the coffee table, only to wake and find George holding my left hand, my fingertips smeared with ink. He was using a cotton swab dipped in alcohol to clean them, his eyelashes casting a fine shadow under the desk lamp. He suddenly let go and the glass bottle rolled to the floor. The sweating your palm will affect the answer sheet scan. His voice was cold, almost like a different person. Keep practicing. On the last night of special training, I was so exhausted I fell asleep at the desk. Half dreaming, half awake, I felt someone gently push aside, the hair falling over my forehead. I'm sorry, George's voice was as soft as a sigh. I pretended to roll over, burying my face into the crook of my arm. I didn't want him to see the redness in my eyes. His fingertips hovered at my hair for a long while before slowly pulling away. On the day of the college entrance exam I wore short sleeves on purpose, letting the plaster cast show in front of the media cameras. Student, a reporter chased after me, holding a microphone. Are you taking the exam despite your injury? Facing the camera, I lifted my left hand solemnly. With this hand, I'll write my name on the honor roll. My final score was over 60 points lower than expected the day my admission letter arrived. The Liu family's villa erupted into chaos. Civil engineering Liu father slammed the envelope onto the coffee table. Do you know what Carolina is studying in the UK? I ran my fingers over the university's golden embossed name. It was a good school. The kind George had suggested, though in an unpopular major get in first, then transfer he had told me at the time. Life has more room for error than you think, but I could no longer find him. In the end, I dug up a text message from an unknown number on my phone. Don't look for me. Make the most of your life. The timestamp was the moment the last subject of the exam had ended in the end. He still chose to leave without saying goodbye, taking with him the tenderness he never voiced and the feelings I never dared to speak. Chapter 3. Snow in Zurich falls quietly. Nothing like the showy blizzards back home. I stood at the window of my apartment, watching flakes settle one by one over an unfamiliar street. 3 months now, and everything here was so clean it almost hurt to look at. No long family rules, no hysterical calls from my mother, and no damned book dictate my fate. I was free, she was free. To the computer screen glowed with my admission letter from ETH Zurich. This should have been the moment I dreamed of for years, yet what rose in my mind was the sight of Willow bent over in a library corner, furiously working through a problem set. She should be registering for university right about now. No failure, no bar work, no meeting Makoto. We were both safe, so why did my chest feel weighed down with ice? At 3 in the morning, I opened that encrypted folder again. The first photo was taken in Willow, asleep at a library desk, her cheek pressed to a math notebook, her eyelashes casting fine shadows under the desk lamp. That day, I should have woken her to keep studying, but instead, without thinking, I pressed the shutter, swiped forward, and every photo was the same kind of stolen moment, her arriving in the rain for tutoring, hair dripping, smiling anyway, her eyes lighting up like stars the first time she solved a calculus problem on exam day, her plaster-bound right hand clenched around her admission ticket, knuckles white. I should have turned back. I should have told her the truth, but I was afraid. I walked to the window and lit a cigarette. Another bad habit I'd picked up since coming to Switzerland. The snow was still falling. I went out and bought a local SIM card, then dialed the number I could recite backward hello. Her voice was still drowsy, soft like a feather inrushing against the eardrum. My whole body went tense, my Adam's apple bobbing several times before I managed to speak. It's me. There was a thump on the other end, like she'd fallen out of bed, then the sound of quickened breathing. George, where are you? Listen to me first. I gripped the phone so tightly the metal edge bit into my palm. We're living inside a book, you're the heroine, and I'm the story's big villain. What in the original plot? My voice tightened. You fail the college entrance exam, end up working in a bar, and then meet Makoto. Makoto? She cut in suddenly, her tone incredulous. You mean Makoto Ito, heir to the Ito group. There's not a soul in S-City who hasn't heard of him. I froze for a second. You know him? Girls at school talk about him all the time, she said with a small scoff. Last month he had a standoff at the school gates, One call from him and a dozen black sedans showed up, but her voice dropped. So the reason you kept avoiding me is because of this? In the original story, I swallowed hard. Makoto Ida keeps saving you from trouble, and little by little you two grow close, and I clench the phone tighter. I act like a madman trying to tear you apart, causing you both endless grief. But in the end, I forced myself to continue. You overcome every obstacle together and get your happy on the other end. Silence, the kind of silence so heavy I could hear only her faint breathing. And what about you? She finally spoke, her voice as light as falling snow. You're just gonna leave me like this? I wanted to say yes, wanted to say we shouldn't see each other, that it was safer this way. But what came out instead was, if you ever need help, I'm still here. She laughed, but there was a tremor in it. George, do you have any idea how long I've been looking for you? I went to your apartment, asked every classmate, even went to the old Wang family estate. What were you doing there? My voice shot up. That place. What about that place? She cut me off. You left without a word, without a single explanation. Now I've gotten into college, now I can take control of my own life, and you call me just to tell me this is awesome book. Her voice carried a kind of hurt I'd never heard before, like an abandoned kitten accusing its owner. My chest clenched tight. You what? She sniffed and pushed on. You say I'll fall in love with someone else, that I'll hate you, then what about you, do you? Her voice grew quieter and quieter until the last words were almost inaudible. I gripped the receiver until my knuckles went white. Willow, I forget it. She cut me off suddenly. You're right, this is my life. I should be the one to decide. Something heavy dropped inside me, but if you ever need help, my voice will. This number will still work. George, she said my name softly, her voice as gentle as snow landing in an open palm. You really are a bastard. The line went dead. I stood there in the swirling snow, staring at my own blurred reflection in the glass, and realized the corners of my mouth were curved upward. On the way back to the apartment, the snowfall grew heavier. I stepped on my own shadow, moving forward, and suddenly remembered the final image I had seen on the day I woke up. I was kneeling in a pool of blood, and Willow's hands were trembling as she held a gun. It was different. She knew the truth. She had chosen her own path, and I had finally learned to let go. Passing a convenience store, I stopped for a moment, staring at the plain ticket ads in the window. In the end, I turned and walked in the opposite direction. Chapter 4, the moment the call ended, my fingers were still trembling. George's voice still echoed in my ears. You'll fall in love with Makoto and be covered in scars, but in the end you'll have a happy ending. Happy ending. I stood in the rain, the plaster long removed from my arm, yet my hands were still shaking. So someone who once made my heart race couldn't even spare me a goodbye hug. Almost without thinking, I touched my left wrist. The callus from training to write with my left hand was still there. 3 months ago. It was this hand George held in his palm, his fingertips brushing over the burst blisters as he said, if it hurts, good pain makes it stick in your memory. Now even that pain was about to fade through the curtain of rain. I seemed to see again that lean figure standing in the library corner, eyes behind the lenses, as still as a deep, ancient well. He'd said life has more room for error than you think, but never mentioned how far one still had to walk alone after making those errors. My right wrist still bore the fading bruise from when the plaster was removed. If the ending really is sweet, then maybe the pain along the way is worth it. The thought sent a chill through me. Almost without realizing it, I typed Makoto into the search bar. The forum photos showed a young man with an earring flipping off the camera, his gaze sharp and dangerous like a lone wolf. Would I fall in love with someone like that? Fall for him the way I fell helplessly for George. My thumb absently brushed the contact, saved as Mr. Wang. Our last call had been 2 months ago when he told me writing with your left hand needs wrist strength, his breath so close it felt like it was right against my ear. Now he was telling me my tears would be for another man, that my wounds would be bandaged by another pair of hands, and that all of this had already been written in some absurd book. The rain had soaked my admission letter through. I crouched down, hugging my knees, suddenly feeling the urge to laugh. How ironic George had rewritten my fate without telling me. But is this new fate going to hurt just as much? My parents had already flown to Switzerland to help Carolina adjust to her overseas studies before they left. They didn't even glance at me, just tossed out. Study hard, don't embarrass the Liu family. George, you said fate can't be defied, but the last thing you taught me was to challenge fate. I lifted my head sharply, the dorm's harsh fluorescent lights burning into my eyes, forcing the heat into the corners. If the given conditions change, the solution has to change too. He pushed up his glasses as his pen carved decisive lines on the scratch paper. Don't get trapped by a preset formula. If the book says I'll fall in love with Makoto, it's only because the Willow in that book had no way out. But the me standing here still has choices. My current worst look was nothing more than finals week after 3 all-nighters, dark circles under my eyes, hair messily tied in a bun pen, calusas on my fingers. I hadn't ended up working in a bar. I hadn't curled up in some strange alley corner and torn clothes, shivering. I'm not broken, so I don't need anyone to piece me back together. The me right now doesn't need anyone to be my hero. The glare on my phone screen blurred the candid photo of George's side profile. It was from the last evening's self-study session of senior year. He'd been resting with his head on the desk, eyelashes casting a fine shadow under the lamp. I still remembered how my heart had nearly leapt out of my chest when I pressed the shutter. You say we live in a book, but this heartbeat is real. You say the ending is already written, but so is this unwillingness to accept it. So I went on with my college life. Every morning when I woke up, I would stare blankly at my phone for a while. George's number was the first in my contacts. I could recite it from memory, but I never once dialed it. Not because I didn't want, but because I didn't know what to say. He'd said, if you need anything, you can call me, but what I needed most now was to stand in front of him openly and tell him, look, I can change my fate too. But I wasn't there yet. I set myself 3 rules. First, study hard. Second, work to earn money. Third, stay away from Makoto. Simple, right? If I could stick to these 3, I could prove I wasn't some pitiful girl who needed the male lead to save her. I found out the places Makoto often hung around bars near the campus gate, a pool hall in the East District, and a racing club. I avoided all of them until that Friday evening when I was riding my little Escooter to my part-time job at the convenience store at an intersection. The light had just turned green when a black motorcycle roared past me so fast. Before I could react, a car in the opposite lane suddenly swerved. The motorcycle slammed its brakes, tires screeching against the pavement. Bang, the bike lost control and crashed into the roadside guardrail. The rider was thrown into the air, his helmet rolling far away. 2 men got out of the car, cursing as they walked toward him, trying to get yourself killed. Instinctively, I stopped, my heart pounding. The next second, the man on the ground suddenly rolled over, a flash of cold metal in his hand. A knife? No. A gun. The 2 men's faces drained of color, they turned and bolted. The rider slowly stood, clutching his left side, blood seeping through his fingers. He looked up, eyes locking directly on me through the flow of traffic, dark pupils sharp at the corners, and an earring glinting coldly in the sunset. Makoto, don't call 120. Take me to the West Side Clinic. His voice was hoarse, yet carried a ruthless authority that burped. No refusal, I'm just passing by, I stammered. You saw me, his tone dropped lower. If you don't want trouble, do as I say. I bit down hard and helped him onto my scooter. His blood soaked through the back of my uniform, scalding hot. That night I came down with a fever. In my dreams I was wearing a cheap backless dress, staggering down a dim hallway in a bar. The tray of sobering tea in my hands shook with every step. New girl, go serve the young master. The floor manager shoved me forward. Don't screw it up. The moment the private room door opened, a hand clamped hard around my throat. Who sent you? Makoto's face, cold as ice under the dim light, was exactly the same as when he had helped me in the daylight. I struggled to explain, but he sneered, tearing at my collar. Liar. The scene shifted. I was pressed against a floor-to-ceiling window, his burning chest at my back. Say you love me, I hate you, then hate me to death. The pain in the dream was terrifyingly real. He forced medicine down my throat, locked me in a penthouse for 3 months, and even when I had a fever after a miscarriage, he was in the next room playing cards. The terrifying part was, in the dream, I actually started to depend on him. In his rare moments of gentleness, I found myself moved. Stockholm Syndrome. 2 days later, I was cornered at the back entrance of the library by 2 men in black. Mr. Ito wants to see you inside the business van. Makoto sat across from me, a butterfly knife twirling between his fingers. Willow, he spoke my name like he was confirming something. Why did you save me? Wasn't it you who grabbed me and wouldn't let go? He suddenly leaned forward, the tip of his nose almost brushing mine. You are afraid of me because you pointed a knife at me. But in your eyes his gaze narrowed more than the flat side of the blade pressed against my cheek, cold as ice. It's like you're looking at someone you've known before, like we've met a long time ago. My heart skipped a beat, he noticed. Did he realize he didn't feel the same disgust toward me that he had for other women? The plot correction had begun. Makoto waited for me again outside the dorm, his black motorcycle gleaming coldly under the sun. I counted the steps down, each one heavier than the last. Where to today? He tossed me a helmet, new bar just opened. I took the helmet, the plastic strap still bore the crack from where he'd squeezed it yesterday. Last time I'd said I didn't like noise, he'd smashed half a bar on the spot. Those shards of glass had haunted my dreams for a whole week up to you. I softened my voice. Who were you talking to just now? Makoto's voice came through my phone, my roommate asking about homework. I stared at the moon outside the window. Do you want to check my call history? There was a pause on the other end. No need, he hung up, but I knew tomorrow one of his guys would just happen to bump into my roommate. Steam fogged the bathroom mirror. I traced sauce with my finger, then wiped it away just as quickly the nth time Makoto brought up studying abroad in the UK. I was idly poking my steak with a fork. London's much more fun than here. He cut his portion and slid it toward me. I'll take you to a real nightclub. I glanced at the scar on his knuckles, a souvenir from last week when he beat up the president of our club. Meat juice seeped into the rice, red as blood. My dad won't agree, I said softly, unless I go to the UK with them over winter break to visit my sister. Makoto's eyes lit up, the tip of his knife screeching against the plate. Smart, he leaned in, the scent of cologne and tobacco wrapping around me. Once you're in London, I'll pick you up, then you'll be truly free. Next, he would lock me away, then hurt me, just like in the dream, using pain to prove love. I clenched my phone, and in that moment everything became painfully clear. No, I am not going down that path. I have my own life, the freedom George fought for me to have. Why should I be the kind of heroine who has to be half destroyed to get a happy ending? I dialed George's number. Hello. His voice was thick with sleep. George. I took a deep breath, my nails digging deep into my palm. I'm going to cut this damned plot off for good. There was a long silence on the other end. All I could hear was the violent thudding of my own heart. Are you sure? His voice was rough to the point of breaking. Once you start, there's no going back. I looked into the mirror at my own defiant eyes. From the day you started tutoring me. I never planned on turning back. On the other end of the line came the sound of papers rustling, and I could almost see him jotting notes at high speed, just as focused as when he used to tutor me. All right, he finally spoke, his voice steady again. I'll secure my footing at ETH as soon as possible, then get you an official academic exchange invitation. I'll find a way to handle the passport and visa on my side. I jumped in quickly. My parents are going to the UK over winter break to visit Carolina. I'll stick to them like glue if I have to. Wait, he suddenly cut me off. Makoto first, I said firmly. I will absolutely never fall in love with that mafia heir. Second, I can get myself out. A soft chuckle came from the other end, the same kind of laugh Mr. Wang used to give me when I solved a hard problem. No wonder you're the one who took the exam with your hand in a cast, so I couldn't help the lightness in my voice. See you in winter break. See you in winter break. His voice softened heroine for the next few months. Every Friday afternoon, I made sure to be at the high school, specific any station right on time, and my hand was a bag of imported fruit bought with my part off times B, and on my face was a smile. I had practiced for a week, Mom. I'm back the moment the door opened, my waist bent into that familiar habitual arc. Lou Mother sat on the sofa doing her nails, not even lifting her eyelids. I sat the fruit gently on the coffee table. These are your favorite grapes. I waited half an hour in line to get them. Just leave them there. She finally spared me a sentence. I stood quietly at the side like a robot awaiting orders. The pain of my nails digging into my palm kept me clear-headed, though my smile never faltered. In the kitchen, I tied on an apron and started cooking. The smoke stung my eyes red, but I couldn't wipe them. Last time Lo-Father saw me wiping tears, he called me bad luck. Dad, please try this soup. At the dinner table, I carefully labeled a bowl for him. He took a sip and his brows furrowed. My heart shot straight into my throat. It's too salty. He set the bowl down. I'm sorry, I'll be more careful next time. I immediately lowered my head, my tone carrying just the right amount of apprehension. One night at 10, I finally returned to my tiny bedroom. The moment I collapsed on the bed, every muscle in my body loosened. My phone lit up. It was a message from George, ETH, invitation letter sent. I stared at the ceiling and suddenly burst out laughing until without realizing it, the tears came. The next morning, I was once again the obedient daughter. Dad, let me massage your shoulders. I stood in the study doorway, my voice so soft it was as if I feared disturbing something. Father didn't even look up, just gave a low a me. I stepped forward quietly, pressing with a measured strength. I heard you won a scholarship. My hands paused for a split second before I pressed harder. Yes, third prize. The judge was Professor Song. He said he really admires you. The corner of Lou Father's mouth lifted ever so slightly. I knew then this performance was finally starting to see the light. On Christmas Day, I wore the pink dress Lou Mother had chosen for me and bowed an apology to Carolina over video call. "Sorry, sister, I was immature back then." Carolina laughed on screen, her smile all sugary sweetness, but my eyes were fixed only on the wall calendar behind her. January 15, the start of ITH's term. "Come to Switzerland with us over winter break." Lou Father finally relented after the call ended, apologized to your sister in person, and put her mind at ease. I trembled with excitement, and this time it wasn't an act. 3 months of bowing and scraping had finally bought me this ticket to freedom. On departure day, I played the perfect servant, carrying their bags, filling out forms, running errands at security. Lou Mother suddenly tossed her coat at me. "Hold this." I took it obediently, feeling the shape of the passport in the inner pocket. This real passport was what I had traded 3 months of dignity for in the terminal. Lou Father glanced back at me. "Don't embarrass us this time." "I won't." I kept my head down, but couldn't stop the upward curve of my lips. 20 minutes before boarding, I stood in front of the airport restroom mirror, fingers trembling slightly. The girl in the mirror wore a Chanel set picked by Lou Mother, her hair neatly coiled, looking every bit the obedient, rich daughter. But I knew in 3 minutes that image would shatter completely. I took a deep breath, locked the stall door, and yanked out my hairpins. My hair tumbled down as I pulled from my backpack a hoodie and jeans hidden in the lining. I changed in seconds, pulled on clear lens glasses and a mask, and stuffed the Channel outfit into my bag, the whole process taking no more than 90 seconds. I'd practiced it countless times. "Attention passengers bound for Zurich." The announcement made my heart slam against my ribs the moment I pushed open the stall door. I caught sight in my peripheral vision of 2 men in black knocking on each stall door. Makoto's men had still followed me. I lowered my cap brim and walked past them as if nothing was one of them, gave me a suspicious look. I coughed twice, deliberately rubbing my nose like a sick college student, and quickened my pace, almost there just a little further, 20 more meters to the security checkpoint. Then a shout rang out behind me. "Stop!" My whole body tensed, but I didn't look back. Instead, I quickened my steps, merging into the line. In the hoodie run, I bolted toward the security gate, whipping out the boarding pass I prepared in advance, slipping through to the other side of the scanner like a fish darting through water, and sprinted for the gate without looking back. Shouts and scuffling echoed behind me, but I was already charging down the jet bridge. A flight attendant stared at my breathless state. "Ma'am, are you motion sickness?" I forced a pale smile, just wanted to sit down early the moment the cabin door closed. I saw through the small window the black-clad men being stopped by ground staff. The plane's engines began row and the runway lights blurred in the rain into a dazzling river of stars. I got out. I really got out to run toward the man who was supposed to be the villain. I pressed my burning face against the cold cabin window and suddenly left. George must be pacing in circles at Zurich Airport right now, his glasses fobbed up. He would scold me first for being too reckless, then secretly pull me into his arms with red-rimmed eyes. When the flight attendant brought me a blanket, I realized I was trembling, not from fear, but from a kind of shiver that came close to exhilaration. Would he lock me in a basement? Would he tie my hands with a necktie? Would he, like in the book, grip my chin and say, "You think you can escape?" I bit my lip and answered silently in my heart. No, because I'm not the pitiful heroine waiting to be rescued. I'm Willow, the one who tore the script to shreds with my own hands. Chapter 5. The day I went to the airport to pick up Willow. It was snowing in Zurich and Forth at the arrival's gate, the cup of hot chocolate in my hand already replaced 3 times. I couldn't let Willow drink it cold. She stood at the baggage carousel, her hair wet from melted snow and sticking to her face, holding a faded backpack in her arms, exactly the same one she'd used in high school to carry her crammed school materials. My fingers tightened around the umbrella handle as I remembered the future from the book. I would fall in love with her, fail to win her, and eventually become the madman who imprisoned her. The electronic board showed her flight had landed 17 minutes ago. I counted the seconds until I saw the familiar figure pushing her luggage out. She looked thinner than in the video calls, her hair shorter, the tip of her nose flushed red from the cold Willow. I heard my own voice tightened as I handed her the paper cup, deliberately avoiding her fingertips. I remember everything that happens next. She suddenly set the hot chocolate down on the counter and tugged at my sleekin. "George, your hands are shaking." Snow outside the taxi window fell even heavier. She suddenly touched the back of my hand, her fingertips icy. I should have pulled away, but my body was more honest than my mind. I turned my palm over to wrap around her fingers. George, her voice was as soft as falling snow. Where exactly are you taking me? The keys in my pocket felt hot, the attic, I heard myself say, and then I'll move out. The bed sheet sets were a favorite pale blue, and the fridge was stocked with the food she loved. You wouldn't dare. Her eyes went wide that night. I insisted on laying the blanket out on the floor. She sat on the bed, wrapped in a throw, nudged my shoulder with her toes. Get up here. Moonlight traced the outline of her lashes, nothing like the frail version of her in the book, the one imprisoned by Makoto. She was supposed to have been abandoned by the Liu family after failing her college entrance exam, meet the drug mafia heir Makoto while working in a bar, and 5 years later I would find her and take her away by crueler means. Mr. Wang. Her voice carried a hint of temptation. Are you afraid you'll become like you did in the book? Raindrops beat against the window as I told her the storyline. She suddenly leaned against me. So now what will become of our fate? Now you're abroad and Makoto is still in Haking playing Mafia Prince, I said, deliberately ignoring the warmth of her proximity. As long as we keep our distance, we'll be safe, George, her knee pressed between my legs, the scent of her shampoo enveloping me. When you corrected my exam mistakes every day, did you ever think about keeping your distance? Then I grabbed her wrist and pinned it to the bed, my breathing ragged, like I'd just run Tenkanari Willow in the book. The start of my descent into darkness was when I fell in love with you wrong. She tilted her head and bit my Adam's apple. You went dark because you didn't sleep with me sooner. Thunder exploded outside, lightning slicing through the blinds and casting flickering shadows along her collarbone. I suddenly realized that all my rationality and fear were melting away in her heat. The worries about turning dark, the anxieties about fate, felt so insignificant in this moment. Her fingertips traced over the old scars on my back as if to smooth away every wound of the past. George, she panted, calling my full name. Look at me. I looked into her eyes. There was no fear or hesitate, only pure trust and resolve. In that moment I understood there was never meant to be any imprisonment or force between us, only two souls choosing to face fate together. I lowered my head and kissed her. This time I whispered, we'll rewrite the ending together. On a spring evening I was sitting by the window, debugging code. Willow was curled up on the sofa opposite, nibbling on an apple, her toes brushing against my thigh like a restless cat. Mr. Wang. She suddenly leaned closer, the crisp sweetness of the apple brushing against my ear as she whispered softly. Your ears are red. I closed my laptop. The heating's too high. Is that so? Her fingertip touched my Adam's apple. Then why is this burning too? At 3 in the morning I woke from a nightmare. In it I was standing in the W family's old mansion, clutching Willow's hair and forcing her to watch the news of me marrying someone else. Another nightmare. Willow's voice came from behind me. At some point she had woken up, her fingers gently combing through my sweat-damp hair. Moonlight streamed through the gap in the curtains, casting tiny specks of light across her collarbone. I suddenly caught her wrist. Do you know what I used to do every single night back in high school after tutoring you? She blinked. I'd ask myself if I'd fallen in love with you. My voice was horror. If the answer was no, I could sleep peacefully. Willow burst into laughter. So how did you find out in the 3rd month in Switzerland? I stared at the ceiling one day while cooking instant noodles. I cracked in 2 soft, boiled eggs because you love them. She swung a leg over my waist, her pajama neckline slipping to reveal a pale swath of skin. George, do you have any idea how dangerous your eyes look right now? Of course, I knew in the mirror that man's eyes were bloodshot like a starving wolf staring at its prey. In the story, I had watched Makoto carry a drunken Willow into a hotel with this exact gaze through the surveillance feed. The book says I caught her wandering hand, that I'd end up locking you in the Wang family's basement. Is that so? She bit my jaw, leaning in, then hurry up. I haven't seen a 10 billion basement before. As I pinned her into the man, I suddenly remembered the rainy day that changed everything after our high school graduation ceremony. I followed her from a distance under my umbrella, watching her crouch under a convenience store awning, eating a cold bun. I should have run over and taken her away right then. Distracted, Willow pinched my waist in annoyance. I silenced her, chattering with a kiss, threading my fingers through hers and pressing them into the pillow. Her pulse beat under my palm, alive and burning. Willow. I breathed against her forehead. If I just no ifs, her legs tightened around my waist. This is the best storyline. Outside, snow fell soundlessly, while inside, wrapped in each other's heat, we tore apart the damned book of fate with our own hands. Chapter 6. On the night before Echo Tech went public, it felt as if all the stars of New York had fallen into our suite. George stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, his tie half loosened, still clutching his speech draft and making endless edits. The sight reminded me of that boy from 8 years ago, helping me solve problems in the library. President Wang. I walked over and tapped my fingertip between his furrowed brows. If you keep frowning, you'll get wrinkles. He suddenly caught my hand, the wedding band on his ring finger pressing painfully into my palm. The promise that had started with a soda can pull tab was now replaced with platinum and diamonds. Willow? His voice was a little hoarse. Let's get married. I raised an eyebrow. George, you already proposed last month at the Zurich City Hall. That one doesn't count. He took off his glasses, his lashes casting delicate shadows under the light. I didn't even finish my vows. I remembered that day he stood on the steps of the City Hall, immaculate in his suit but sweating profusely. When he got to 4 richer, he froze up and I ended up yanking him down by his tie to finish the kiss myself. So you're making it up now, I teased. The next second the world spun. I was pinned against the glass. The lights of New York flowed behind us, and his kiss, strained and tender as it had been for 8 years, was more passionate than ever. I've been afraid. His breath burned against my ear. Afraid the plot would pull us back in, afraid that one day I'd turn into the madman who hurt you. I bit at his Adam's apple. And now you're not afraid. I am. He laughed low, but I'm more afraid of losing you. Fireworks exploded outside, lighting up the starlight in his eyes. In that moment, we were no longer characters toyed with by fate, but the victors who had rewritten the ending with our own hands. 3 days later, an obituary for Mrs. Wang arrived in George's inbox. I woke up in the middle of the night to find him smoking on the balcony, the glow of his phone casting his face pale. For the first time in 8 years, he'd reached out to someone back home, hacking into the Wang family's private network to check his mother's medical record. Are you going back? I asked, wrapping a blanket around myself as I walked over. He shook his head, but his fingers kept tracing the edge of his phone, a nervous tick of his one deeply anxious. I booked the tickets on the spot. Think of it as me going back to visit my old school on the plane. He stared out the window the entire time, the clouds casting shifting shadows over his glasses. I knew what he was thinking. The mother, who had used him as a tool for revenge the nights she'd whipped him into practicing piano until his fingers bled, and the day he awakened to the truth and walked away without looking back. She spent her last 6 months looking for me. His fingers paused on the carved dates of life and death just to make me come back to see her one last time. He hesitated, but her final words were, "Make sure the Wang family acknowledges you." I tilted his chin toward me and kissed him. "George, you don't need anyone's Ackman anymore." Rain slid down the black marble headstone, making the words Wang family, Liu clan gleam. George crouched, wiping at dust that wasn't really there with his sleeve. I watched as his white shirt cuffs turned translucent, plastered to his wrists in the rain. There was a faint scar there, the mark left when Mrs. Wang had struck him with a ruler at 15. I remember those herds clearly. Even now, he suddenly smiled, rain clinging to the gold rims of his glasses. Sometimes I can't tell if she treated me that way because the plot made her, or if that was just who she was. George. I cut him off, tilting the umbrella toward his side. Fate is fate, and human nature is human nature. Just like we were given a predetermined path, yet we still chose not to hurt each other. In the distance, the murmur of chanting mixed with the patter of rain on leaves. I crouched down so our eyes were level and saw my tiny reflection in his lenses. Your mother used fate as an excuse to control you, and you used the plot as an excuse to avoid me. I brushed the raindrops from his glasses, but in the end, it's us who choose how to live. He suddenly gripped my wrist hard enough to hurt. Rain slid along the sharp line of his jaw and dripped onto back of my hand, warm enough to feel nothing like rainwater. Chapter 7. President Wang just got word my assistant, who had been waiting outside the cemetery, walked up quickly and lowered his voice. Low Technologies is holding an AI launch event at the convention center today, and their promotional materials use the core technology from our deep space project. Willow's fingers tightened slightly on the umbrella handle, producing a faint click. I took the tablet from him. On the screen was Carolina, the former fake hairs, speaking confidently on stage. She wore a white suit, her hair pulled back in a perfect Xi and smile toward the camera. Our Jackson system adopts the most advanced neural network algorithm. Neural network algorithm. Willow suddenly laughed. She can't even explain gradient descent. I swiped to the next page, Liu Technologies' financing proposal. They plan to use our tech as a front to raise funds. Willow tilted the umbrella slightly toward me. You've confirmed it, and mem. I pulled up another file 2 years after you left Carolina, returned to China. She reinvented herself as an overseas educated elite, convinced your parents to in her startup, and then, due to mismanagement, the Keppel chain collapsed. All they had left was an empty shell. I tapped the keyboard, so they set their sights on the Ida family. The Ida family needed to clean their reputation. The Liu family needed to survive. The two struck a deal, and once their engagement announcement was out, the media flooded the news with perfect golden couple praise. I brought up photos from the wedding day, Makoto's face, utterly expressionless, while Carolina's smile was stiff like a perfectly crafted mask. Married life was nothing short of a farce. Makoto continued frequenting nightclubs, living on the edge with bullets and bets. Carolina drifted between fashion shows and scandal columns. She poured the Liu family's last remaining assets into the Ida family's money laundering projects. Last year, Makoto took a spinal injury in a gang shootout and now relies entirely on a wheelchair. On the screen popped several surveillance stills, Carolina with different men in nightclubs, Makoto smashing a glass from his wheelchair. Willow watched silently for a moment before saying, "Emotional debts can be left unsettled, but money that we settled." She looked up at me, her eyes glinting with something I hadn't seen in a long time. "Let's go take a look and call President Lee and the others along." We were meeting them this afternoon anyway. The lights in the convention center were blindingly bright. We stood in the control room on the second floor, looking down through the glass at the entire venue. Carolina was on stage, speaking with passionate conviction, a meticulously produced promo video playing on the giant screen behind her. The Liu parents sat in the front row, their smiles rigid like two wax figures that had been hollowed out after 5 years of dedicated research. Carolina's voice boomed through the speakers. "We have finally broken through the technological bottleneck." Willow gave a short laugh. 5 years, we only open-sourced the code 2 years ago. Suddenly a stir rippled through the audience. Several well-addressed the middle school. Aged men entered from the side door and headed straight for the VIP seats in the front row. A wave of whispers swept across. These were the true giants of the domestic tech industry, the kind who would normally never show up at an event of this level. Carolina visibly froze, stumbling over 2 lines of her speech. Mr. Liu hurried to his feet to greet the newcomers, but one of the industry heavyweights waved him off. "No need for formalities. We're here to meet President Wang and President Liu." President Wang? President Lee. Carolina's smile began to crack. There must be some mistake. Just then the giant screen went black for a second before flashing to life again, playing a video of Carolina draped over a man in a bar. Laughing flirtatiously, the footage cut to surveillance of the Ito family's dealings with gang members and finally to a side-by-side comparison of their company's back-end code with our open-source project A99 match. The venue erupted in chaos when Willow and I stepped out of the control room. Carolina was pounding on the console, shouting, shut it off, don't bother." Willow's voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the entire hall. The back end's in my hands now. She wore a black turtleneck that made her skin look even fairer, her hair loosely pinned back, the picture of poise and elegance on her left ring finger. She wore her wedding band deliberately in Willow. Carolina screamed, "What are you doing?" Willow ignored her, walking straight to the podium. I followed, taking the microphone a staffer handed me. "Ladies and gentlemen." My voice carried through the speakers. "Sorry to interrupt this," I glanced at Carolina Creativity Showcase. A few chuckles rippled through the audience regarding all the technology presented here by Liu Technologies. Today I have 3 points to make. I projected the files from my phone onto the big screen. First, their sole Carol independent research is entirely copied from our open source project. Second, the $3 billion they're seeking in funding is actually meant to patch the losses from the EO family criminal operations. I paused, meeting the ashen face of Mr. Liu. Third, all of this evidence has already been handed over to the police. The hall went dead silent. Willow took the microphone. As for my personal grudges with the Liu family, she glanced at her biological parents in the crowd. Those were settled years ago, but impersonating our company to commit fraud, absolutely not. Her voice was soft but sharp as a blade. "When it comes to money, I won't give up a single cent." Carolina lunged for the microphone, but twisted her ankle in her high heels and went sprawling on stage in his wheelchair. Makoto roared in fury, ordering his men to act, but they were already being restrained by the security team we'd planted in advance. Willow Makoto's voice was almost guttural. "If you hadn't run away, I'd never have ended up like this." Willow didn't even glance his way. Instead, she turned to the industry giants and gave a polite nod. "Sorry to let you witness this farce. I've already had your cooperation agreements delivered to your car." As we walked out of the venue, the sound of Mrs. Liu's desperate cry echoed behind us. Willow Mom knows she was wrong. Willow's steps didn't falter for even a second. It had started raining again. I opened my umbrella over her. She looked up at the dull gray sky and said quietly, "Honestly, I stopped hating them a long time ago." I made a sound of acknowledging, but seeing them like that, she slid into the car, the corner of her lips curling upward. I have to admit it feels pretty damn satisfying. I pressed a kiss to the top of her head and closed the door. In the rear view mirror, the flashing lights of police cars glowed as they pulled up to the convention center. Chapter 8. The rain on the way to the airport came down in sheets. The wipers thrashing wildly against the windshield, yet still unable to keep pace with the eye, kept my eyes fixed on the rear-view mirror, where black SUV clung to us like a shadow, my nails digging deep into my palms. "Buckle up." George's voice was calm only on the surface, his right hand already reaching into the glove compartment for the stun gun. The next second, the world spun out of control. Bang! The impact slammed into us from the rear right, the whole car skidded sideways, the airbags exploded in a deafening pop, and my forehead smashed into the side window. The metallic taste of blood filled my nose. Instantly the car door was yanked open, a masked man looming there, the black muzzle of his gun pointed squarely at me. "Miss Liu, the boss would like to see you on the other side." George's hands were wrenched behind his back, his eyes burned red with fury, but the gun pressed to his temple kept him frozen in place. I barely caught his gaze before I was dragged into the waiting black SUV. As the door slammed shut, I caught a glimpse of him screaming my name, his voice torn apart by the rain. Abandoned chemical plant, cold water splashed over my face, the taste of rest seeping into my mouth. Makoto rolled toward me in his wheelchair, the empty space from his knees down hidden only by the loose sway of his pant legs in the wind. He removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes bloodshot and webbed like shattered glass willow. His fingers brushed over the cut on my cheek with a gentleness meant for something fragile. "You've finally come back." His voice was hoarse, yet carried an eerie tenderness. "This world is wrong." He turned his chair, his voice echoing in the cavernous warehouse. "You were always meant to be by my side. If not for that escape, we would have had our wedding by the sea." His speech quickened like reciting a meticulously rehearsed script. "I'd kneel in the sunset, slide the ring onto your finger. You'd give me 2 children, one like you, one like me." His eyes shone with a near-manic light. "I'd build an entire business empire for you, make you the most adored queen." I lifted my eyes, my voice flat as ice. "Makoto, everything you've just said, I've already lived it in my dreams." He froze in my dreams. "You locked me in a gilded cage and called it love." My nails dug into my palm. "You had your men humiliate me and called it a trial. When I was 3 months pregnant, you pushed me down the stairs yourself." I stared into his contorting face. "Blood ran down my legs and you held me saying, 'Don't be afraid, we'll have another.'" The cold warehouse air squire with the tang of rust. Makoto's face went pale, his lips trembling, his gaze eerily like that night in my dreams, the rainy night when I burned with fever after the mascaras, and he crouched outside the bathroom door, begging me not to die. "I could have been better if only you had stayed with me. You're the only woman I could ever accept." His voice dropped lower, heavy with deranged obsession. "That counterfeit is gone. The only woman at my side will be you." Looking at his madness, I felt a sudden bitter laugh rise in my chest. "Makoto, do you still not understand?" "Understand what?" He slammed a hand against the wheelchair's armrest. "We are destined to be together." Destined. I slowly rose to my feet, looking down at him. "Then let me tell you what destined really means. It means me staying by your side, trading my pain for your happiness." My voice was soft, but each word was a blade. "It means waiting endlessly for you to turn around, praying that someday you'd finally learn how to treat me with kindness." Makoto's pupils contracted sharply. "I don't want to live every day in fear." I went on, constantly on edge, worrying that one wrong move will turn me into the cripple's nurse, changing your diapers for the rest of my life. "Shut up," he roared, hysteria cracking his voice. "I'd treat you well. I would have seen the ending in my dreams." I cut in softly. "In the end, we do hide away on a quiet island, and you really do become the perfect husband." Makoto's eyes lit up. "But do you know how much blood and pain those so-called happy endings cost?" I lifted my wrist, showing him the bruises. "Makoto, your version of love is breaking me apart, piecing me back together, then breaking me again over and over until I become the shape you want. No, this time is different." He shook his head violently, his wheelchair slamming against a metal rack. "But I'm not Clay Mako Low. I'm human." My voice was low, yet each word cut like a blade. "I have flesh and blood. I can feel pain, I can feel fear. I won't choose few, because I've realized that without you I can avoid all of this, and I can still be happy." "You liar," he snarled, pulling out a dagger. You're mine without me. You're nothing. The blade pressed under my chin, warm blood sliding down its edge. You owe me a life. You owe me a child. You owe me our entire future. Come with me, or we die together. I looked straight into his eyes, my voice as cold as ice. Makoto, I don't owe you anything. What I owe myself is to live. He raised the dagger and I closed my eyes. Bang. The warehouse doors exploded open, blinding light flooding in. George was the first through armed sweat, officers right behind him. Willow, his voice held a panic I had never heard before. A flash of madness crossed Makoto's gaze. He suddenly pulled another knife from beneath his wheelchair and lunged at me. Then, die if I can't have you. Time seemed to freeze. I saw George move with an incredible speed, his figure a blur in the dim warehouse. Look out. He shoved me aside, his leg lashing out to kick Makoto's wheelchair hard. The screech of twisting metal tore through the air as the chair crashed into a rusted rack. A protruding iron hook punched straight through Makoto's chest. His screen was raw with pain, blood gushing from the corner of his mouth. George instantly pulled me behind him, his chest heaving, his eyes ice cold as he stared down at the dying man. Makoto's head lifted with effort, bloodied fingers pointing at us. You. I stepped forward, still shielded by George, and looked down at him with a cold, final stare. I told you we were never meant to be. The last trace of unwillingness flickered in his eyes before his hand dropped limp, the light fading from his gaze forever. George turned immediately to check his fingers brushing gently over the cut on my forehead. It's over, you're safe now. I lean into his powerful beat of his heart. Outside, the wail of sirens rose and fell. By the time we stepped out of the warehouse, the storm had passed. Sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling over us. George's hand tightened around mine. Let's go home. I nodded, glancing back one last time at the shadowed warehouse, the place where a mad obsession had been buried, along with the destiny that would never come to pass. The rain returned in torrents, washing away the tracks we had made on our way here. All the suffering, entanglement, and false salvation that had once been written into our fates would at last be rewritten by the choices we truly made.